Go.
Good morning, Sergeants. I'm Specialist Ghostin. I'll be giving this briefing on interpersonal communication. Overall classification for this briefing is unclassified. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome my small group leader, Staff Sergeant Carla. A little bit of safety concerns. Let's make sure we avoid all ceiling fans, any tripping hazards, as in backpacks, loose wires on the floor. Make sure we maintain our COVID guidelines with our mask and social distancing. All right, let's get into it. So, in this briefing is about interpersonal communication and how it pertains to leadership. We'll be breaking this down into 3 portions. First of all, we'll be talking about what is interpersonal communication. Then we will roll into how to apply these components of interpersonal communication to our leadership styles. And finally, we'll talk about why interpersonal communication is important when it comes to leadership in general. Then we'll go into a quick summary, and then any questions you may have, and then we'll close out from there. So when we're talking about interpersonal communication and what it is, we can break it down into 3 major components. We can talk about empathy, active listening, and clear communication, right? So let's start with empathy. Empathy is the ability to pick up on people's emotions and their feelings behind what they're saying and their actions as well. This is a very important part that we have to remember, because at the end of the day, we're all people. No matter how hard of a soldier we are people, and we have emotions, and our emotions affect our actions and the things we say. We're talking about active listening. We're not talking about just sitting there nodding our heads saying Roger, Sergeant, yes, Sergeant, nodding our head. We're talking about actively paying attention and listening to what the person that we're communicating with has to say, and taking all words and factors into consideration, and then using that information to think about what they say before we respond. And then we can talk about the component of clear communication. One thing that's very common amongst the Army is the fact that people have accents to say things differently. We have to remember that the Army we may be the United States Army, but we take people from all over the globe. We have people from Russia, Africa, different countries in Africa, and even within the United States itself, you have people that come from different parts of the country and have different accents and say things differently. The most common one that most Americans are aware of is the difference between soda and pop. It's a very large controversy in the country, but it's an example of how you have to listen to what people say and clearly communicate what you're talking about and speak very clearly and distinctly. All right, now we can talk about how to take these 3 different components and put them all together to effectively use interpersonal communication in our leadership styles. So we're talking about empathy. We define it as picking up on people's emotions and feelings behind the things they say and do. It's a very important thing to remember, because soldiers are bound to ask questions when you give out orders, and you have to be able to pick up on the emotions behind what they say to determine whether or not this soldier is trying to be disrespectful, or if he or she is asking this question to get more understanding and clarification behind the tasking that has been put out to them, or the information that's been put out in general. If we can do this and empathize with our soldiers, we'll be able to see soldiers are more comfortable with communicating with their leadership, and NCOs ourselves will feel more comfortable communicating with our own leadership to get more information to put out to our soldiers, which will clear up a large portion of the communication chain from higher to lower. And when we talk about active listening, it's very important for us as leaders to listen to what our subordinates say and not just blow them off just because they just now joined the Army or they're a known troublemaker. Even some of our best troublemakers are some of our most knowledgeable soldiers. So it's very important to ask them questions, or not ask them questions, but to listen to the questions they ask, because sometimes they're asking this question so they can see if there's a different way that you want them to complete the tasking. It's very common for soldiers to be given a task and ask the question, do we have to do it this specific way? It's very important for us as leaders to listen to this question, do we have to do it this way, to understand that they're not necessarily asking out of disrespect to say they're better than you or know more than you as your subordinate, but to see if they can do it their way, the more efficient or safe way that they've found. And this will allow soldiers, again, will clear up that comfortability between a soldier and their leader in communication. If they feel like that they are being heard, they will feel more comfortable asking more questions or giving their input when decisions are being made. So they feel they're a part of the team and not just some grunt out here doing work. Now, when we come to the clear communication part, we're talking about speaking very clearly and very distinctly and saying what we mean and not trying to have soldiers pick up on what we mean, what we're inferring when we're speaking. We want to speak very clearly and very distinctly and get straight to the point. When we give out our tasks, we don't need to put the weather's going to be 60 degrees while we're doing blah, 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 but we need to sit here and say, hey soldier, we're going out to do our PMCSs on vehicles today. So they're understanding that today, 0930, we're going to do PMCSs in the motor pool on our vehicles. So they understand the full scope of what you're asking them to do and what they need to do. If we do this, your soldiers will feel the need to ask less questions about what they're doing, but they will probably feel the need to ask questions, the good questions of why we're doing this, so they can understand why the Army works the way it does, or how we're going to be doing this. So when you get to the place of wherever you're completing this tasking, it's just a matter of rolling into it and accomplishing the task. So now we're going to take this component, the pieces that we put together on how to interpersonally communicate. We're going to talk about and get more in depth on why it's more important to apply interpersonal communication to our leadership styles. So when we talk about why it's important, the thing we have to remember is that we're just not these soldiers' leaders on duty. We're their leaders off duty. You want your soldiers to be comfortable coming to you with their personal problems, and if they feel like that you understand where they're coming from and that you listen to what they're saying, they're going to feel comfortable, which will allow you to manage your team better and plug and play your soldiers on different taskings, which is a very important part because management of a team is one of the most important things a leader has to do. If you can't manage your team, it's going to make it very hard and you're going to be labeled one of the notorious toxic leaders that we have in the military. And when you get this understanding with your soldiers and they feel comfortable communicating with you, your soldiers and you as their leader will have your own kind of language that you have to speak. You'll be able to speak a lot more quickly, a lot more efficiently because less and less questions will be asked. Because it's a known fact that in the Army, we do a lot of the same task over and over. So if they ask these questions early on when they're working with you, later on down the line, they don't feel the need to ask these questions because they know exactly what you, as their leader, wants them to do and how you want them to do it. And this allows you to be closer and manage things a lot more efficiently. Now on to our summary. So today we talked about interpersonal communication. We talked about what is interpersonal communication, how to apply interpersonal communication, and why it's important to apply interpersonal communication. Are there any questions? No? Thank you all for coming to this brief, and you all are released back to your NCOs.